Welcome, one and all, across the Alpha Quadrant and beyond to Lower Decks, a Star Trek podcast by Fantastic Geek, your official, unofficial Star Trek podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me, as always, is Pete. Hailing frequencies are open.
I got a big old body. Lower Decks, a Star Trek podcast by Fantastic Geek for episode 206, The Spy Humongous, comes to you now via Crimson Force Field.
And news from the fleet before this episode leaves orbit. Pete, I know that when those Emmy nominations came out, we had a little bit of a finger wag for the effort made by CBS All Access / Paramount Plus, awards people, PR, whatever. But in the last week, Star Trek Discovery has indeed won an Emmy that in the category of Outstanding Special Visual Effects in a Single Episode. That's for the episode Su'Kal, and there you go. Though the series was not nominated for visual effects for the season, and I'm not quite sure what's up with that. You can't argue with the fact that the visual effects for this season, or at least an episode from it, have won an Emmy.
And congratulations to them. Overdue, I think. Since Star Trek has been back in this latest incarnation on TV, they've definitely blazed a trail. So, that's great news.
And Pete, speaking of technology, I understand that everything is great with Paramount Plus as a website and an app. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I don't know. Talk to Lower Decks showrunner Mike McMahon.
Yeah, Pete, I saw Thursday morning, late morning, our time, earlier morning, Los Angeles time. He was trying to explain to people how to find the episode. Take us deeper into this, Pete.
Yeah, so he tweets before an episode comes out, hey, it'll be up tonight, you can check it out. And then must have been deluged with people saying, I can't find it, where is it? To the point where he's got to explain to people for the streaming service that his show runs on, that they need to do a special thing in order to see it, which is just laughable.
Yeah, like when will they this is the only app that does this. Let me just point out. I mean, YouTube is how old at this point as a website and so on and so forth? It's got to be close to 15 years. I mean, it's not that much, but it certainly is more than 10. This is the only one where you can't find an episode of a series on the series page for it. And he was explaining, if you go to the last episode and fast forward to the end, it'll recommend the next episode.
It'll auto play it. So the way to watch my show is to watch the previous episode and kick it into autoplay, not to go to the page where they're all kept and to see it as a choice. I mean, this is shades of waiting for short treks, which would show up at 9:00 at night before they finally, 2 seasons in, went to this drops at midnight Pacific. And Matt and I are refreshing, and the writers of the episode are like, where's our episode? They're tweeting about this, and they don't understand the poor reflection.
And I'll cut, Paramount Plus / CBS All Access. I'll cut them a little slack for when that happened several years ago. It was a newer service. It was a weird time. I mean, they figured out as a service, it was weird to be dropping stuff in the evening, and fine. There were some growing pains there. How is this happening here? How is this just not auto post to all spots or whatever? But
I just don't get it, and I feel terrible for the creators involved to have to deal with this. It must be maddening.
Well, from the Packleds running Paramount Plus, let's head to the Packleds that show up in this week's Ready Rundown.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Captain Freeman Cerritos is seeking a ceasefire to Pakled Planet, talking peace. A ceasefire would be quite a feather in the cap for Carol, though it shouldn't be too complicated. She and Shax beam down and they welcome Captain Janeway. She's greeted by a man whose helmet isn't big enough to talk peace, and, oh wait, Rumdar has escaped and is now on the Cerritos. Captain Janeway must stay. Rumdar's escaping to see shields and Crimson Force Field. He's a spy, a very, very dumb spy who's taking pictures of his foot. He's taken to the secret gift shop, and the plan is for Ransom and Kayshawn to get info from Rumdar. But now Rumdar is gone and off the ship. Intercut is Freeman talking to the Pakled Queen. They want to talk to Rumdar, but he's gone. Freeman wants to get peace and finally meets King Pakled and Emperor of the Pakleds. It's a revolution. New Pakled leader. Elsewhere, our lower deckers are wrapping up breakfast, and they're being sent on anomaly consolation duty. It's either the collection of interesting things or science trashed collection day. Boymes takes a stumble, and Ensign Casey has a cool kids club crew called the Red Shirts. They're invincible. How about joining this new bunch of friends and future leaders? Brad's in, but they're sticking with Trash Day. That is Tendi, Rutherford, and Mariner, who find uncollected crystals and bones from the planet where things evolved all weird. Rutherford breathes the dust from it in, and he's got a big old body in one of the most chuckle-worthy moments. Montage of the Ouchie plant, the Shocky plant, the Goo Blaster, and nanobots. Tendi's trying to make everything a pristine adventure, so stop it! Tendi, however, is tired of everyone whining, and she's left to collect stuff on her own. Tendi's eaten by a shrieking giant slug, then pooped out. Maybe ACD is the worst. She holds a glowy box and rages as glowy energy emerges, turning her into a mantis creature scorpion thing. Meanwhile, with the red shirts, Boimler is told to improve his posture. Stand up straight, not like a Kazinti from TAS. He's got to fix his uniform, too. After all, Riker had extra room in his pants, for the legs. And Brad's got to fix his hair, and shoulder pads would be good, too. Brad is encouraged to give a rousing speech, so go inspire that crew. His first attempt isn't great, but for take 2, speak as Riker would speak. Boimler says, in this, our darkest hour, the crew can be trusted, and they'll get out of this due to the crew, and now it's time to kick some butt. Now Brad needs respectable friends at his side. Look, there's the ACD crew doing dirty work. Are you on a starship or a friendship? The red shirts see Scorpion Tendi raging, and they give overlapping, inspiring speeches. They're all talk and no action. Boimler jumps into action, ready to counteract the mood shifter with food-based disaster comedy. The power of slapstick works, and the core 4 is back together. Meanwhile, where's Rumdar? Ransom and Kayshawn see he's in space? Rumdar was in the bathroom, which actually was an airlock. Oops. Codes now, please. Rumdar is beamed back down, and the Pakleds never wanted peace. Rumdar was a spy, and he found out that the Enterprise has big bathrooms. He's a good spy, and Freeman just wishes she knew what secrets he kept, and he says he'll never talk about smuggling a Veruvian bomb onto Earth. Beating Captain Janeway, hooray! Ultimately, Boimler has been kicked out of the red shirts, but he thinks that they're shameful trying to copy others. Be yourself! All but Ensign Casey are ready to step away, but Casey's headed to acting captain duty later today. On the bridge, the command crew is going for drinks, and Casey gets the big chair. For 3 seconds until shift change. Go clean the airlock where the Pakled went, Shift over, the lower deckers prank call Armis. Legacy shout out to the big bag of crap.
Red alert. All hands stand to battle stations.
Pete, we have an incoming tactical analysis of this week's threats. Let's start with that most terrible of threats, the Pakleds.
I mean, Planet Pakled, or was it Pakled Planet? It's interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. The thing that struck me this week is we've finally had a full-on Pakled episode here, 6 into the second season, where they've become a quote-unquote threat, is that the writing room must have been, okay, so the Next Generation had the Borg, and Deep Space Nine had the Dominion. Who's our big threat? we're a comedy, we're taking the Packlids, and it just works.
It does, particularly since we've seen demonstrated in this show how Starfleet sometimes can take their eye off the ball, and in that environment, the Pakled threat has risen. I think to be non-comedic or to have a non-comedic view of the show for a second, I think it still is an open question, particularly with 4 episodes after this one. It's an open question. Are the Pakleds are they having weapons supplied by someone else? Is someone pulling the puppet strings? That sort of thing. And, they're not the biggest threat ever. This is not the Dominion coming on through, but
The
it's
what?
enough. The Dominion, Pete.
The what?
But the Pakleds are enough of a threat to keep the Titan busy and things of that sort. One imagines kind of at the outer edges of Federation space.
Yeah, and just the meme there of the Dominion when I said it before, but the idea that of all the things they could choose, that they chose them, and you get a glimpse in their society in this episode, with a queen, a king, an emperor, a rebellion, and everyone's all on the same page with this spy situation. They all know about it, and then they reveal it, and then they tip their hand at their master plan.
Yeah, all courtesy of Rumdar, who, I don't know, in line with the comedy of the episode, in line with the expectations of the Pakleds, shows up as the world's worst spy. And I think there might have been an argument, it will be funnier if it takes the Cerritos crew time to figure it out, if Ransom and Kayshawn aren't putting the pieces together, and maybe there's a lower decker saying, look, it's a spy thing. No, I kind of like the fact that Ransom and Kayshawn figure it out almost immediately.
But not the location of the spy who's defecated in an airlock and gone out into the vacuum of space.
Rumdar is strong. We also have Ensign Casey and his perspective, and those of the, I guess, red shirts who've never studied history and don't know that that's not a great name in Starfleet quarters, but certainly they represent a different kind of threat.
In an episode in which there were a lot of great moments, the lunacy of Tendi turned into a scorpion, and then the red shirts stepping up, each of them to give overlapping motivational speeches, was peak hilarity.
Yeah, and I think, while, what's the saying? Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. That mindset has some credence, but sometimes you also have to do the job you have to get the job you want. So there's a little bit of a Star Trek lesson there, know your role, check yourself, and so forth. And I think it's to the story's credit that Boimler is able to give an inspirational speech to the red shirts, albeit a kind of a plain spoken from the heart, very Boimler-esque speech. I refer not to the one on the faux bridge, but when they're in the hallway, that gets 3 of the 4 red shirts to say, yeah, maybe I will do my job in order to advance at my job. And Casey ending up being the winner of the prize he wanted, but then gets the prize he didn't. And of course, next on the list, Pete, is all those bits of anomalous trash.
I was kind of surprised they didn't throw us more Easter eggs here. You got to wonder if that's an active discussion in terms of both the writing room and the design team. Like, all right, hey, put this item here and put this item there. But the trope of, hey, they bring back stuff that then needs to be disposed of, works well within the idea of Star Trek, because it seems to be a common idea that they, cart this stuff around, and if it's not, captain's office, ready room, tchotchkes, then it obviously needs to be disposed of.
And I think too the list of things that they go for, the Shocky box, the Ouchie plant, the Goo Blaster, and so forth. Most of them are very well oriented towards animation. Like, you might, in a live action writer's room, you might have the discussion, all right, is it worth the time, money, and energy to shoot the Ouchie plant into an actor's face? Is it CG? Is it practical? Is it a CG explosion and then we have to go back and do makeup and put quills in there? Like, is it worth it versus it's the same drawing to draw the Ouchie plant than it is to draw anything else? So this does not need to be the place to do Easter eggs and callbacks. This is where you can go crazy with the big giant shrieking slug and lean into the fun of that and the craziness of that. Particularly since you've already had 2 episodes that are pause worthy, and you go, look, that's the cloth from Encounter at Farpoint. That's the phaser from from The Cage and so forth. So I think I don't know. I think the trash was well presented here, as indeed was Scorpion Tendy. Great design and also a moment underpinned by kind of real character emotions.
Yeah, it was fun to watch the morphing, and then the way that they work her out of that is Boimler making a fool of himself. So knowing what he can do to bring this back, and they hinted at it enough earlier in the episode with him spilling the food on his head and her cracking up.
All right, Pete, let's scan for some theories here. And here's one maybe not particularly tied to this episode, but just something that's been bouncing around my head in the last week. Do we ever have an opportunity for these voice actors to portray these characters in live action?
Oh, I think at some point it's going to happen. It's already been a discussion, whether or not they put them in a Picard season 2, they walk by at headquarters or something like that. But I think it's too great an opportunity to pass up.
Now, with us officially starting the second half of the season with this episode, the Pakled threat, such as it is, the Pakled storyline, maybe it's a better way to put it, is now being revisited. Is that something that you think gets wrapped up this season? Is that just kind of the MASH Korean War in the background for as long as it needs to be? What are your thoughts there? Particularly with the secure knowledge that at this point in the season, certainly by the time they're doing the final, animation and whatnot, they know there's a third season.
The 3 through lines of this season: Boimler returning to the Cerritos with a clone on the Titan, and continued mention of the Titan, the red shirts fixation with that. Freeman's aspiration to, achievement. Okay. And then the Pakled threat, I think, are all going to cross at the end of the season. And I think we heard it in this episode, this plan to smuggle a Veruvian bomb to Earth. So I think that brings Titan into the situation. It's a way for Freeman to potentially get promoted and to get, what's the other Boimler name? Billy Boimler back on the scene.
I think, too, if I marry your response with what I mentioned before, that it's possible that the Pakleds are being puppeted by someone else. Maybe that's your reveal at the end of the season. Which is a way to both kind of keep the Pakled storyline going over on, but now it's now it's phase 2. The mind goes to the Romulans, the perpetual bad guys, but whomever it might be, I don't know. Maybe they go a comedic route, and it's. I mean, I know we obviously had the Armis shout out here, but maybe it's like it was Outrageous Okana all along that was behind the Pakleds, or something like that. Something to kind of undercut the threat a bit.
I think if you give it a serious route, that it could be interesting. What we learn about the Pakled in this episode. We saw our first female Pakled ever in the Queen, and whether or not it's just throwaway or now it's an idea that they have several different leaders and then were overthrown and that there was a revolution, and that guy became the emperor, I guess. I mean, maybe Rumdar now is the leader, returning as the conquering hero, and maybe he's the one. I mean, maybe the Veruvian bomb thing is like a kamikaze situation, but he doesn't understand that it's a suicide mission or something along those lines. Like I think could be a lot of fun when you play up the desperate nature of it.
Rumdar for Pakled biggest helmet. Make Pakled planet go.
Yes.
What other theories do you have?
The Kzinti speaks here, okay, and then the posture joke that happens as a result of it. So hunching over there, these are how the Kzinti really look, and then he brings his posture up.
Yeah, an obvious callback to the name of the episode was the Slaver Weapon, right?
Yes.
To the Slaver Weapon episode of Star Trek the Animated Series.
Maybe they're behind the Pakleds, Matt. Wouldn't that be awesome? And that this red shirt crewman, this is part of it, and it's over. They're going to trade some Wittershuns.
I think, do I remember correctly that had Enterprise gone to a 5th season? I know Shran was going to join the cast full time, but that the Kzinti were going to return.
I don't know.
That would be fun. Regardless, I guess what I'm trying to say is a resurgence of the Kzinti is something that's kind of been, I don't want to quite say Star Trek DNA, but it's something that's been at the periphery, I believe, before. Add to it, I mean, to have that recognizable design and species from the animated series come back to this animated series, that could be a really fun reveal. I think it would be a fun, not that I think Mike McMahon and company are trying to make a show to add value to the back catalog. Pete, that's why they're making CSI Vegas. They've said that. It's merely to add value to the CSI back catalog. So it goes on, but I don't think that's what they're doing here. However, it would be cool to be like, and would you like to see more of the newly revealed Kzinti threat? Well, also on Paramount Plus is the Star Trek the Animated Series, so on and so forth. You could be onto something, Pete. I guess now the question is, you're suggesting that the Kzinti ensign is in on it. I'll take the opposite point of view, Pete. It's the Kzinti government that is corrupt, not all the Kzinti people.
Wow. Bringing in Armis here, as it could only work on lower decks.
Yeah, particularly like if that's gonna check a box, which of course it literally does, but if that's gonna check a box for legacy character, I mean, okay, I think that when we talk legacy character, it's oh my goodness, an update about Dr. Crusher. It's not necessarily, yep, Armis is still on the planet that probably now has a beacon that says nobody come here. There's like a oil sludge guy that'll get you if you do, so just stay away. And everybody says, okay, I'll stay away. Okay, we get to check in with Armis. It's Pete, I remember, okay, being 7 years old, maybe 8, not quite sure when Tasha's death aired in relation to my birthday, but wiping away those tears at the funeral and so forth. That said, has the episode aged great? Not really. Is it worth a big old joke? Sure.
Yeah, he is a skin of evil. The stones, the jewels there, almost felt like an Infinity Stones paperweight joke a la Loki.
It certainly could be. I mean, at a certain point, probably on the one hand, it's like animating brightly colored things that need to fill a space. You're going to run into crystals or orbs or spheres or something like that before too long. But is it perhaps hinting, Pete, that when, not if, but when the gal whose name escapes me at the moment, who owns Viacom CBS, when she's successful in selling the whole thing to a larger company, is it possible that it's Disney? Is it possible it's Star Trek and Marvel? It's as simple as, a very special Disney Plus Lego Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, Nat Geo special. Like, it's possible.
On ESPN.
On ESPN, exactly. 30 for 30. On Bojitsu, and so forth.
Parisi Squares championship.
There you go. So, Pete, there's lots of big potential in the future, particularly if, once again, there's corporate troubles that may or may not affect this Star Trek franchise, which is arguably more healthy now than ever. I'll just mention, because there's no other place to put this factoid, Paramount Pictures swears that there's multiple Star Trek movies in development. Okay, Jan, I'm sure there is, particularly as they just ambushed the head of Paramount Pictures in the last week and showed him the exit and Sure, Jan. But yeah, that aside, the state of Star Trek is super strong. So of course the empire that supports it is going to fall apart.
And then Winger Bingston here getting a shout out, had him referenced and seen in the first season. Wonder if we might get him back.
I mean, bring it on. It's, if nothing else, it's a reminder that this is not a large ship. This is not a massive crew. Add to it, there's only so many lower deckers. So of course the ensigns are going to know about the lieutenant's one-man show for this, that, the other. It's something that doubtless people are aware of. And even if he doesn't physically show up on screen, it's enough of a reminder to just say, hey, remember that guy? It's adding to the sense of community for the ship. With that, let's go to Hailing Frequencies.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
We start, as we always do, with the Twitter poll. The Packlids are backlid. What did you think of this week's Star Trek Lower Decks? And Pete, I stuck with it. Okay, I didn't even give any hint of a 4-3-2-1 this week. So the choices were this. They all were spy themed, James Bond themed. So the first one, My Little Octo Packlid, got 23.1%. Next one, Rumdar is Dummy Galore, with a cat emoji, got 7.7%. Be kind of disappointed more people didn't vote for that. I thought that was my funniest one, although maybe it took a couple of James Bond steps for people to get the punchline there. Next one, Goldhead Loves Gold, 23.1%. And then heart emoji, The Spy I Loved Thee, which I was pretty proud of that one too, got 46.2%. Some Twitter responses. First one is from JT Atkins, who, Pete, recently has become the new fastest gun in the West here. We have a little bit of a Western showdown here, but JTA's me on Twitter says, hashtag Star Trek Lower Decks is smart. Star Trek Lower Decks is strong. Janeway is clever. We heard from Jackie Wolf. That's at Jackie Wolf on Twitter. Overall, great episode, although the Pack-led A plot was a lot stronger than the Red Shirts B plot, in my opinion. Glad to see more of Kayshawn, and I hope that Starfleet has developed a good treatment for stretch marks, because poor Rutherford is going to need it. Pete, I bet that Dr. T'Ana has a light that she can wave back and forth to make those stretch marks disappear.
Oh, there's a hypo for that. There is.
We also heard from Spider-Ham Lincoln. That's at TessLC139. Not a bad episode, but that's 2 in a row I didn't much care for. Best part was the end, prank calling Armus. I am a skin of evil. And then it was the cherry on top. Last is AMC. That's Ann Coltenham on Twitter. Really enjoyed this Star Trek Lower Decks episode. Loved seeing the captain and Ransom working together. Freeman needing to find a Pack-led with a bigger helmet was brilliant. Great to see Kayshawn back with dialogue after the first episode. Can't wait to hear the podcast. And now, Pete, Ann hearing her words on the podcast. Well, Pete, with 4 episodes left to the season, only 1 left to this month. Actually, 1 podcast of this left to the month. The last one is September 30th. But of course, this whole voyage made possible by those who support us on patreon.com/fantasticgeek. They are the crystals we keep amassed on our desks.
Absolutely. Get yourself over to Patreon/fantasticgeek. Just recorded a special episode about the first 3 episodes of Y: The Last Man on FX on Hulu that will only ever live on Patreon. You determine the price you put on our content. It takes just $1 a month to get you through that door. All sorts of things for you to check out.
And as always, so proud to be listener supported, particularly as doubtless the length of podcasts will be ramping up as we get back into the 1-hour show territory, looking ahead to Discovery in November, Hawkeye later in November, and so forth. For now, though, Pete, let's keep the Star Trek conversation going. How can people be in touch with you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Peter, Pieter J. Ketelaar, Ketelaar, 12,050 followers. Can't be wrong.
And while I'm personally on Twitter as Looking Back Lost, do be in touch with the podcast. Comment on fantasticgeek.com. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Gmail, where we are Fantastic Geek as well. But wait, there's more.
Facebook.com/fantasticgeek, all one word with the P and the H, like it today.
So for those listening on the Pop Culture Podcast feed, the next Pop Culture Podcast episode will not be What If, episode 107. Instead, with the Emmys tonight, the primetime Emmys tonight, we will be doing an update as to whatever the wins are for WandaVision and The Mandalorian. I dare say, Pete, Star Trek has won all the Emmys. In fact, not even I dare say. Fact. Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Lower Decks have either won or lost already all the Emmys for which they are nominated. But of course, beyond that, next weekend, podcasting What If and Lower Decks on the Pop Culture Podcast feed. If you're here just for Star Trek, looking ahead to, if you can believe it, Lower Decks 207 this time next week. For now, though, Pete, I will say adios to all the listeners and give you the final word.
I need to learn to blow some big brass.
Never fails to take my breath away.
I wish I could kiss her and squeeze her.
Excuse me?